I'm Akiko Mumford, and I will be your moderator today. I have never done this on this platform, so you're going to have to bear with me. We are recording, and at the very end, we will go to gallery view in order to take your questions. But please feel free to eat your lunch. You will see me munching away. Sheila Jones is here in the background, making sure the technology works seamlessly. If you have any questions as Georgina gives her talk, pop that into the Q&A and I'll find an appropriate time to ask those questions for you. And for everyone, please do look at the Q&A because you can uptick questions and I will ask those first, the ones that you've upticked. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Georgina joined us at Equal Experts last summer as a DL on John Lewis. And long before she came to us, she's been a neurodiverse digital leadership coach, and charity founder who champions kindness in technology teams. She's led multiple digital and DevOps transformations for some of the UK's biggest brands and is passionate about creating safe spaces for teams to thrive, solve complex problems, and be themselves. Georgina, over to you.
Thanks, Akiko. What a lovely introduction. Hi, folks. So I'm going to give it's probably about a 20-minute talk. So I'm going to run through some stuff. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to kick off. So when I was 14, a teacher told me that I was never going to do anything with my life. I was always that smart but unfocused kid, the loud one who acted up in class, the one that only finished their homework when it was an interesting subject. And also the one that found it really difficult to make friends because she was too weird, too talkative, too much. And here I am today talking to you about how being kind makes me a better leader. So throughout my career, I've strived to prove that teacher wrong, that I would make something of myself, that if I set my mind to it, it was completely and totally possible to do something, even if I was scared of my own shadow. I grew up in a really tiny village in Devon, which is in the southwest of the United Kingdom. And as kids, we'd play in fields, make dens, and we used to know when it was time to go home, when it was getting dark, that it was time for tea, which is dinner, for those who aren't from the southwest or the north of the UK. My first technology role was as a test analyst, when internal jobs were on actual cork job boards with those little funky pins. And I worked in an airline and I moved from their call center into their technology team. And it was the one time in my career that I'd looked at a job description and gone, I can do that. I can do pretty much everything. Then I was made a manager when I was 21 and I went back to having no clue. I was constantly swimming uphill, trying to figure out what I was doing, what I was supposed to be doing, and also who I was. So after a couple of years, I wondered if I could do this role anywhere else, and where better to do it than London. Oh, wow, everybody seemed to know what they were doing, even more than when I was in Devon. Everybody always knew the right words to say, and I was completely blinkered by being in the bright lights of London. It's completely different to the small village I grew up in. So how did I end up leading UK-wide programs that most people in the UK would have interacted with whilst being afraid of my own shadow? I think that's a mixture of luck, kindness, and belief from other people, some belief in myself, some great bosses, and also a bit of hard work thrown in. So what does a great boss do, or a great leader? They believe in you, they give you feedback, they give you that constructive and that positive feedback in a timely manner. And what I mean by that is they create that open space for you to be able to give you the feedback so you can respond to it in the way that you need responding to that feedback. They also help you grow in a psychologically safe space. I never thought about what I was doing when I was starting my career. I never thought about what I was doing, the things that I was doing. I just did them. I didn't think about where my career was going to be, what a good manager, leader, or boss looked like. But also I didn't think about how I wanted to feel about myself. And it's made me think about the people I've had the privilege of leading and interacting with over the past few years, and understanding myself has given me that opportunity to be a better leader and a better cheerleader. Those feelings of self-doubt, self-sabotage, and lack of self-belief, I initially thought was imposter syndrome, which, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is the persistent inability to believe in one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. And then I realized I'd spent so much of my life trying to fit in that I'd lost myself. And Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, said to the New York Times in 2018, one of the criticisms that I've faced over the years is that I'm not aggressive enough or assertive enough. Or maybe somehow, because I'm empathetic, it means that I'm weak. I totally rebel against that idea. I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. And for me, that starts with being kind to yourself. And ultimately, the unkindest thing I believe I've done to myself over those years is stay in a company when I was broken and should have left before I needed to spend 7 months recovering. And a lot of that was stress induced. So the workplace can be really tough, especially for empaths. And for those who haven't come across that term before, an empath is an emotional sponge. A person who is more likely to feel, recognize, and mirror another person's emotions or movements. This can be really tough because taking on other people's emotions is really draining. It can lead to burnout, sadness, and exhaustion. So it's so important to take your time to fill up your own cup before you're giving your energy to others. Being an empath is also a really powerful thing. Being able to bring that different viewpoint into a room and understanding that actually the energy is a bit off is also, for me, a real superpower. It allows you to bring consensus back into a room, if sometimes you know the right words to say. So it was a real wake-up call for me when I got made redundant during at the end of those 7 months, or in that 7 months, I can't really remember what time period it was, when I was at my sickest. Up until that point, I was leading a brand new project for the company. I was the first delivery lead to be part of the bid process, and we won that bid. So I was tasked with assembling a team, fostering a team culture, and building a product in 90 days, which is no mean feat. So at that time, I was living in London and really did need to work. So in the face of things, I was doing really well. I was leading this project, I was going out, I was having lots of fun, but I'd completely forgotten how to look after myself. And they got to a point where I was going to bed at around 6, 7 p.m. every night, and I was living off chicken nuggets for a couple of months. I haven't eaten a chicken nugget since, actually. At the beginning of this project, I'd set out expectations with stakeholders about communication and engaging with other people, and we had lots of workshops to understand communication styles of other people, of ourselves, and spent time working together to understand that we're all human beings. And the key to these conversations and these key conversations were the crux of the success of that piece of work. If you've come across the book Surrounded by Idiots by Thomas Erickson, if you haven't, I'd highly recommend reading it. He talks about the 4 types of human behavior, and in short, the book explains that people aren't idiots. We just don't know how to talk to each other. And also, we don't necessarily know how we communicate and how to best use those skills to communicate with other people. The more you understand about your communication style and other people's communication styles, the easier it is to foster a healthy team culture. Work environments can be really brutal places. Some people have forgotten what it means to be kind, and this makes me feel sad. I've been shouted at in offices. Maybe that person had a bad day, who knows? But the more I understand about myself, the more I can contextualize this information and realize that it was not my fault. There are definitely times to be self-critical, absolutely, but there are also times to acknowledge when it is not your fault when something happens. So talking about understanding ourselves, consider your 3 core values for a second. I'll send out an exercise afterwards for those that want to delve a bit deeper into this. So considering your core 3 values for a sec. So mine are integrity, humility, and kindness. And I believe in these things so passionately because you have no idea what someone's going through. We've got incredibly good at hiding our true selves at work. And by opening up to those around you, you can create that network of kindness and the space of psychological safety. And that starts from within. So as I said earlier, don't pour from an empty cup. Look after yourselves before you take care of others. How can this show up in the workplace? So there are 3 things that I was thinking about the other day. Number 1 is saying yes to everything, prioritization, and also being that go-to listener for your team. All of those things, there's a balance here between them being really powerful tools and equally can be quite detrimental. So saying yes to everything can present a wealth of opportunities, but it can also mean that you can lose focus. Prioritization or a lack of can mean that you do the really fun thing first, but actually you can miss the most important one. And then being that listener for your team, you can become the oracle of information and also that safe space for people to be themselves around, to vent, etc. Versus you can really burn out in that situation. So ask yourself, do you have a safe space to vent? Are these conversations impacting your boundaries? What are your boundaries? I can also send these questions out afterwards if anybody wants to, ask themselves this in more detail. And also, how can I use those boundaries to protect my own peace? Knowing your own boundaries is super important before you give your time, effort, and brain to another person. So going back to those values of integrity, humility, and kindness, these words are completely intertwined for me. Having the courage to be kind, to do what you say you're going to do and do it with humility, because again, you have no idea what someone's going through. You can see such a small window into somebody's life, especially on screen. You can see this lovely background behind me, but what you don't know is that I'm staying at my friend's house for a couple of weeks. You wouldn't know that until I gave you that information. So please take a step back before having a difficult conversation because you have no idea. I had to reach a really low point before realizing that I needed to be kind to myself. And on reflection, all of those signs were there. So self-love, kindness, and compassion are acts of rebellion in a society that always expects us to keep pushing on, keep moving, keep scrolling, keep active. So finding that self-compassion can really create that positive energy for yourself and also the projects and the teams that you work with to be the reason that someone smiles today, the reason that someone opens up. So we started this conversation considering how to be kind to ourselves, to ourselves, and how being kind can help us thrive, and also helping our teams do the same. And also to be positive sometimes as a leader during these really hard times can really help the people around you, as can leaning on your own support network. Being kind takes some self-awareness, which we don't get taught, or I definitely didn't get taught when I was younger. And the great thing is that people are always willing to help. I've taken the time to understand what my values are, what I'm good at, and where my challenges are. And then building onto that, where I can add the most value to the client. And ultimately, that sits with the value in which I believe in myself. So this journey has led me into the EE network to speak to you guys today. So thanks, Eden and Jamie, if you're here today, for the referrals. And also to my current client, where I've had the opportunity to thrive. So leading up to the present day, I've created training courses on neurodiversity, I can't speak, for a large UK newspaper. I've coached people in kind leadership, and I've also founded a charity. I'm comfortable with my own boundaries, and also helped myself. And whilst this will always be a journey, finding that respect and kindness for myself. I don't know if you've ever watched About a Boy, that at the beginning, Hugh Grant talks about he's an island, but I believe that no one is an island. And whilst we need a solid foundation of boundaries, human beings are social creatures. So you don't have to do this alone. speak to friends, family, therapists, coaches, work colleagues. There are a lot of people that you can choose to open up to, but it only has to start with one. It doesn't have to be this big, scary, I have to tell the world all of my fears. You really don't. You really, really don't. And also, if you want to reach out to me, I'm always happy for a chat or a coffee. To be that network effect. It all starts with one person being kind to another. So be that catalyst for kindness. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Georgina, thank you so much for that. There aren't any questions in the Q&A yet, but I would bet that people are thinking things. So I want to encourage people to put that into the Q&A, and I have jotted down a bunch of questions that I want to ask you. And so I'm going to take the opportunity to go and ask you some of them. But one of the first things, and Sheila, I don't know, are we going to go to gallery view at this point, or can I just not see the gallery view? So I'm going to assume that that is happening and I just can't see it, but I'm also going to just launch into my own questions and my own thoughts about this and ask Georgina. And if while I'm doing that, that sparks questions for you, go ahead and pop that into the Q&A and I will start asking your questions as well. You and I have had, I was lucky I got to talk to you long before this talk, and that whole metaphor about not giving from an empty cup, I so resonate with that, and that I know, and I bet many people on this call know what it feels like to be giving from fumes. And I love, that we talked about, you don't give from an empty cup, you don't even give from a half full cup, you give from the overflowing of the cup. And it's your own job to make sure that you're getting your cup filled. And I just love that. But my first question for you refers back to something that you said earlier on in the talk about coming to London and being blinkered by the bright lights that you were, not just the bright lights of the city, but the bright lights that you were working with. And that's actually something I often hear about equal experts. When the quote is that your colleagues at EE are frighteningly good at what they do, that promotes imposter syndrome, like you said. And I wondered if you had any advice for all of us at Equal Experts who will face this because of the bright lights in the network.
I think for me, the EE brand is that we're all experts in something, and together we create that equality of expertise. So while someone may be the best DevOps engineer will know the most about retail, which I don't know either. I do know a decent bit about retail. It's loyalty in retail is one of my fun spaces, but anyway, everybody is an expert in something. And the reason we're part of this network is that we get the opportunity to work with equal experts in our network, but also the wonderful clients that we work with and the experts in that space, and two heads are better than one. So I guess my advice would be back yourself. You're pretty cool and you're pretty awesome.
Cool. Thank you. And we have a question from Danielle. And the question is, what was the turning point for you where you realized you didn't need to feel imposter syndrome anymore?
Ooh, I wouldn't say I don't feel it. I'd say I feel it sometimes. What was the turning point? So I've had some really difficult conversations with people over my career, and some of them have been at really loud volume at me. And the more of those conversations I've had, the more I've realized that those type of people don't always know what they're talking about, and that I can come to the table with something equally good, even if my voice isn't as loud as them. And yeah, that's where I'd get to with that.
Excellent. Thank you. I have another question from Gary Webb, and it's nice to see the topic being explored. Really enjoyed your talk. Would love to hear examples that might surprise people about how someone has opened up in different scenarios and how it helped them.
I'm not really sure I understand the question. How someone is opened up in different scenarios, how it's helped them. Okay, So I opened up about my ADHD diagnosis to a colleague when I first started at my clients. I work with John Lewis at the moment, and the responses of like, oh, okay, like what does that mean? And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Rather than the, oh, ADHD is weird, you're a weird person, which sometimes maybe I am, but opening up to somebody and them not shooting down something because they didn't understand it, like they came from a place of empathy and curiosity that really happily surprisingly shocked me.
And I just want to say that we're all weird in our own ways. You don't need to be neurodiverse to be weird. And that actually leads a question for me to ask. And Georgina, I'm wondering, it may not even be, I want to look at this a little bit from a neurodiverse lens and how people in a team might help somebody with neurodiversity be kind to themselves. And your answer may actually be for anybody and not just somebody who's neurodiverse.
I think going back to one of the things I said at the beginning of the talk about psychological safety, I believe that in a team, we all have the responsibility to make other people feel heard and people feel listened to. That some people may not know they're neurodiverse. Neurodiversity it's not necessarily a new term, but it's being spoken about a lot more at the moment, and it's in the public eye as a conversation point. But I think if we take that out of the conversation, being that space and opening that kind space for somebody to open up to you is really important. And then really practical things. I find loud spaces really difficult. So if I'm in a loud space, it's for a short period of time and I like to spend some time decompressing. That's super helpful. Fidget toys, whether that's a pen, whether that's my iPod case, doesn't matter, those kind of things. And also a really great phrase for me is if you can see it, you can be it. So the fact that I have fidget toys in my hands doesn't mean that I'm not listening. Actually, it means that I'm focusing even more because I'm not thinking about what to do with my hands.
Yes. And actually the amount of people, that was an answer actually that doesn't just apply to neurodiverse people. The amount of people who fidget, I do this all the time, and EE is just endemic. So thank you for that answer.
It's fine to fidget.
I have a question from Reese Crossland. The question is, a lot of what you said resonated with me. I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD. That makes lots of my struggles make more sense. I was wondering what you have found most effective in terms of resources or coaching techniques for those who are neurodivergent.
Ooh, good question. So finding an ADHD coach was really valuable for me. So when I was diagnosed a couple of years ago, it felt like I could then see the mess that was my life, but the resources didn't feel available to me to figure out how to clean it up. So I found an ADHD coach, a lady called Leanne Maskell, who has been integral to my neurodiverse journey and understanding my brain more. She's also helped me to become an ADHD coach. So I think coaching is a really valuable tool, whether that's with me or someone else, irrelevant, but I can talk to you about it for days and in more detail, but finding that person that can help you. And also if you read a lot, there's some really incredible GitHub resources on neurodiversity that I would say would be a great place to start. In terms of communities, there is a community called Unmasked, which is by a lady called Ellie Middleton. So she was diagnosed at 24 with ADHD, and she's currently going through an autism diagnosis. She's an absolute powerhouse activist for being that voice for neurodivergent people.
Fantastic. Thank you. I have another question, and Aziz wants to know, if a team member opens up and says that they suffer of imposter syndrome, how can we help them?
I think it can be quite a private conversation to start with. I think by being able to open up with some of your struggles can help. It can help level the playing field of someone feeling that they have imposter syndrome. And I think to acknowledge that somebody's admitted it is a really powerful thing, because to open up in terms of vulnerability in a space where everybody is professional can be really hard. So I think acknowledgement of the bravery that it takes to be able to open up about that kind of thing, explaining some of your own vulnerabilities to help level the playing field, and also to be aware that some of these conversations are better in private, to make that person feel safer.
It's good advice. Next question from Vera. Being kind is one of my values. However, I notice people take advantage of this during difficult conversations. Although I'm managing the conversation, I can clearly feel they aren't willing to engage or collaborate. Usually they try and overpower. Any tips in managing this?
Good question. Maybe it's a conversation of the boundaries that you can set within the conversation. Taking a step back and say, what are we looking to get out of this conversation? So taking the sting out of it's me versus you. So being able to say, actually, we're talking about this thing right here, rather than it's a conversation between two people. Like sometimes it can be emotionally charged, and people, if you feel that somebody's pressing your boundaries, they may not realize. So being able to take out the emotion from the conversation can be really helpful. I think also being able to stop a conversation when it's becoming too much, and saying, I need to take a few minutes, can also help. But we don't always have the luxury of being able to say, I need to take a couple of seconds. But I would say that being able to put it with something rather than a conversation between two people can be really helpful, like reframing the narrative. So what are we looking to get out of this conversation today? We came in to discuss A, B, and C. Like, how are we doing with that? We've got another 20 minutes. Is there anything else we want to discuss?
It's really helpful. Next question from Paulo. How do you deal or cope with being kind in a space or environment where people perceive that as a weakness and try to take advantage of it? Do you move on somewhere else?
Potentially, that could be an option. I think kindness can be a grassroots movement, but I also believe that senior leadership have a massive part to play in showing organizations that it's okay to be kind. And sometimes that doesn't always exist. But I would say that senior management have a massive part to play in making people feel safe in an environment.
Thank you. And a question from Sarah. Thanks for this. It really resonates with me. I've been learning a lot about ADHD, just received Scattered Minds at home today for personal and professional reasons. I was thinking if we can create a channel for neurodivergency, a safe space to share experiences and knowledge and support. I spoke about this with a colleague this week, and this talk made me think it can be really useful. What do you think, Georgina, about a channel?
I think that sounds great. I think for somebody in a network to be able to feel like they've got the power to champion that kind of thing, I think it's really beautiful. Yes, I'm happy to share my ADHD with Brain with anybody that wants to listen to me.
And Sarah, I really like that channel as well. I too have been thinking about neurodivergency inside of EE, and just would love to start that conversation in a wider way. And again, there are no questions right now, but I am going to take the opportunity to ask mine. Georgina, you've talked about, and other people have talked about, how kindness is one of their values. And I wondered if you could tell us whether you've seen your core values reflected back at you from your colleagues at EE, because some of your colleagues, some of your values are actually values that I hear all the time. They're not in the same language. So humility is rife here, as far as, we use the term low ego. But I wondered about the other ones, integrity and kindness, where, I see it in surveys, people saying those things, but I wondered if you've seen this live. And you don't have to say you do. I'm completely open to you saying, no, actually, we don't live those values. Please be honest.
I'd say yes. So one of the so I met Werner a little while ago, face to face in the office when I first joined in May, and we've kept in contact because we were on the same client, and he truly resonates with me in all of those things. So if I'm having a bad day or a good day, he's always there to bounce ideas off, but also to be that safe space of a vent or that voice of reason where I'm like blah 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 blah, and he'll say, maybe, maybe not. And I really value that. So I would say yes, the people that I've met throughout my journey have lived and breathed those values.
Fantastic. And one more question from me. In your talk, you talked about the importance of bosses and how they really helped you on your journey. And of course, here at Equal Experts, we don't have bosses. And I've had many conversations with people across the organization saying things like, we love that we don't have bosses here at EE, but actually everyone needs a boss. And the way that I hear that is everyone needs someone to have their back in a lot of the ways that you talked about. And so what is your advice to us at Equal Experts in that we don't have bosses, but we do have a team? How do we replace that function of people having each other's backs?
I think for me, having a boss when I was earlier in my career, to be able to have that space of to be able to help me grow was really powerful. I think in an environment where people are further on in their career, I think it does go back to what you said of having each other's back. So if there's something that's happening within whatever the example is, if something is happening, to be able to go to someone and say, look, this is either a challenge that I'm facing, like, what do I do? And to make sure that that space is safe enough that people feel like they can have that conversation, because when those things become big things, that's when the really big problems happen. So make sure that people feel safe to express the good, the bad, and the ugly, so it doesn't become a massive thing.
Yeah, it's huge. Just being able to have that person alongside of you.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's a lot to do with trust and humility. So being able to say, "Oh, I've been in that situation before," or "That sounds really rubbish." How sometimes it's not even what can I do to help. It's that sounds rubbish. How
Yes.
can I
I
listen?
heard you. Yeah, fantastic. Georgina, thank you so much for giving this talk today and answering all the questions that we threw at you. I think it's one more question from Werner has slipped through underneath my door. Soundboarding is one thing, but how do you identify and, for example, mentor a neurodiverse person when you are not neurodiverse or have deep knowledge on the topic? Great question, Werner.
Great question. I think to come from a place of curiosity and learning is a really great place to start. It's not about knowing everything about the topic. So take neurodiversity out of the conversation. I've mentored DevOps colleagues before, and I wrote some code when I was a tester. I could probably find something in an Oracle database, but I've not touched any. Like, I've never built any infrastructure. But what I can be is that person that can listen and feedback things. Oh, is this what you meant? Or point someone in the right direction if they do require that deep knowledge. You don't have to have deep knowledge to coach somebody through things. I think you probably need a bit of deeper knowledge if somebody is asking questions about that specific thing, or find some resources to point them towards.
Curiosity and openness, it's so important in so many situations. And so we are out of questions unless someone else slips one through. And I am going to again thank you, Georgina, for all the insight you've given us about kindness and about the workplace and some about neurodiversity. And we will do some next steps. I do want to see, and I'll have this conversation with Georgina afterwards, that neurodiversity channel will appear on Slack, and we'll find a way to get that to all of the people who have participated in this call, as well as the core values. And I will come, well, we will, Sheila will help me find a way to get that information back to you. Georgina, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, folks. Have a great rest of your Friday. Bye.